Well, we're on to the book of Samuel in the Bible. And the book of Samuel's actually split into two parts. 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel. And you know why it got split up? Because back when it was written, they didn't have really long books like I've got on my shelf here. All they had was scrolls of parchment. And they ran out of room. They couldn't fit it all on one scroll, so they had to put it onto 2 different bits of paper. And today we're looking at the first half, 1 Samuel. Now 1 Samuel starts with a lady called Hannah, and she's singing a song because God had answered her prayer for a child. She had a son called, wait for it, Samuel. That's where the book gets its name from. And she sings a song about what's going to happen. The song actually tells us what happens in the rest of the book. She sings that through Samuel, God will choose a king. How will we know? How will the people know which king that Samuel and God has chosen? Well, what Samuel's going to end up doing, he's going to get some oil. Got some oil here. And he's going to put it on the king's head. And he's going to kiss the king's head. And that's how he shows who God has chosen to be king. That's what Samuel's job is going to be. And then Hannah goes on to sing that God opposes the proud. That he doesn't like it when we're proud and think we're great and don't listen to him. But God helps the humble. Those who don't think they're better than everyone else. Those who trust God. And that's exactly what we see in the rest of 1 Samuel. We see someone who's proud that God opposes and someone that's humble that God looks after. Well, one night Samuel was sleeping. Maybe he snored as bad as me, I don't know. And he heard a voice calling to him. And he went, "Here I am." He went up to Eli, the priest, and said, "Here I am, you called me." And Eli says, "I didn't call you. Go back to sleep." So Samuel went back to sleep. And he heard a voice again. And he said, "Eli, what did you say? What did you call me?" And Eli says, "It wasn't me. I think God is calling you. Next time, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" Samuel goes back to sleep. He hears a voice saying, "Samuel, Samuel." And Samuel wakes up and he says, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." And God speaks to Samuel. He tells Samuel what's going to happen. He says, "Samuel, you're going to be a prophet. You're going to speak for me. And you're going to choose, well, I'm going to tell you who to make king. I'm going to tell you who to anoint." Where's my oil gone? With the oil. Well, remember what's happening in Israel at the time. Right at the end of Book of Judges, we saw that Israel had no king. They did whatever they saw fit. But then the people asked for a king to make things better. But here's the problem. The people ask for a king who's proud. They want an impressive looking king, a proud king who looks good. And so Samuel anoints a man called Saul. Now the people liked Saul as a king. He was bigger than everyone else. He was impressive to look at. He was strong. He could beat all the enemies. And so Saul was anointed king by Samuel. And then he was crowned king by the people. But here's the problem. Even though Saul beat lots of the enemies, he was proud. He was dishonest. He didn't follow God with all his heart. And he disobeyed God. And remember, God opposes the proud. So God rejected Saul as king. But I don't want you to be my king anymore, Saul. And Samuel ignored Saul after that. And instead, God told Samuel to pick someone who was humble. A man called David. Now, David was humble. He didn't look that impressive. He was the youngest. He was the smallest in his family. He had 7 brothers who were all bigger than him. But God didn't choose them. God chose David, the shepherd boy, who liked to play a bit of music. And so Samuel anoints David's head with oil. But he's not crowned yet, because Saul is still alive. Well, David trusted God. So one day, the Philistines, the enemy, came to fight God's people, and they brought with them a huge soldier. He was called Goliath. And for 40 days, Goliath came and said, "Come and fight me. Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough." And everyone was really scared of him. Even Saul was scared. But then David arrived. David trusted God. David said, "God protected me when I was looking after the sheep and a lion came or a bear came. I'm not scared. I trust God." And he got his sling and he put his stones in the sling and he went out to fight Goliath and he threw the rock and it hit Goliath in the head and he went, "Timber!" See, David trusted God and God helped him. God helps the humble. Well, how do you think Saul felt about David being so popular and doing so well and being anointed the king? He got very, very jealous. He got very, very angry. And in the rest of the book, he tries to kill David. He chases him around and David's running away and hiding in caves. Saul gets worse and worse. But David gets better and better. David trusts God. He doesn't try and kill Saul. He trusts God's plan. Well, right at the end of 1 Samuel, Saul dies in a battle with the Philistines. And so David is ready to be crowned king. But we'll find out a bit more of that next time. So what can we learn from 1 Samuel? Well, let me read a verse from 1 Samuel 6, verse 16, verse 7. It says this: God says, "Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected Saul. The Lord does not look at the thing man looks at. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." You see, we can be so obsessed with how we look, can't we? Having the right clothes, the right hair, the right stuff, looking big and impressive like Saul. But God's not bothered with all that stuff. He looks at what we're like on the inside. He looks at our heart. And he wants us to be like David, to be humble, to trust him, and to trust his plan. That's what God cares about.